My name's Guy Castivan. I've been a professional bike and kit tester for over 25 years. And this is the Tech Talk round on the Spark RC World Cup AXS bike that I've been riding here at Hard Rock Enduro. So I've positioned myself perfectly between the live singing and the Portaloos to fill you in on the details of the bike. So starting off, it's the HMX frame, so it's basically the middle frame out of the Scott composite range. You've got HMX SL, which is the super light version, which is around 1800 grams. This is still sub 2 kilos for the frame with all the fixtures on it. And then there's the HMF, which is the entry-level model, which I think just creeps over the 2 kilo mark. But all use the same mould, just a different fibre inside that mould. And obviously, most eye-catching details straight away is the fact that the shock is completely hidden. It's not an e-bike. It does go up hills like an e-bike, but it's not an e-bike. It's a linkage, it's an internal system that's it's a modified version of the Bold bikes. Scott bought the Bold company, and it's not the same system. On a Bold bike, the shock kind of sits along there and is driven differently, but basically your shock sits in there. So that's the bottom bolt for the shock, and then the upper bolt is sat in there. And you can see there's even just really neat features like that little bolt-on gusset there, filling the gap between the chainstays and the main frame there. And that's this little linkage that goosenecks inside the frame to drive the shock down vertically inside there. You've got double-sided pivot joints there, and it's actually a flex stay system at the back, so no rear pivot on it. But you've got details like a little ribbed bumper guard that runs all the way up there. You've got carbon fibre cross ply chain protector on there. You've got a really neat floating mount for the rear brake that just kind of sits. Come around to this side, you can see it kind of sits between the axle and the rear stay there, and just that helps separate the loading and means that this flex stay can still work the same as it does on the other side. So very sorted kinematic on this bike. I mean, essentially they got the actual layout of the suspension sorted on the previous version of the bike, but then they've internalised it all for this version. And for 120 mil of travel, it does do remarkable things in terms of control. And, you know, it pedals very efficiently naturally. And then, of course, you've got the ability to lock it out partially, dropping it down to 90 mil of travel, or to fully lock it out. Well, not full, it's still a bit of bounce in the lockout. You know, it still feels like a suspension bike rather than a totally solid rigid bike, but again, just super efficient climber. So it's a 120 mil bike. It's at the rear and at the front with this Sid Select Plus RC3 fork that already gives it an advantage in terms of suspension travel over a lot of XC bikes. But it's also got 67.2 degree head angle, 76.6 degree seat angle, so really good poised climbing seat angle and a relatively stable front end, and 471 mil reach on this large. So really one of the early bikes. You know, Scott have always pushed for a more progressive geometry than most people on their XC bikes, and that continues this trend. It really is a remarkably composed and sorted bike, even on rough stuff. But this still is the RC version, so it is the proper XC cross-country version. So you've got the Fraser IC SL XC all in one bar and stem combo, 740 mil wide with the short, I mean, it's basically an inverted stem really. And the cables, well, what there are of them for the lockouts, I mean, obviously it's running wireless AXS system, so you've not got a gear shift cable, but all these three cables here and the brake cable all slide in. It's that side of the stem, isn't it? Slide into that side of the stem to internalise all the controls on there. Just keep it looking neat. And then this little clip on the back just pops off to reveal the bolt clamps there. But even so, you know, even here, they've just another nice detail that the fixture that the bolts thread into is replaceable. So if you do thread them, you know, you haven't ruined the whole carbon setup at the front. And also, I mean, this is the setup it comes with, but there's a full range of different Fraser bar stem cockpits in basically different effective stem lengths, different widths, different rises, different sweeps think there's so you can, I mean, this is what you get on the bike, but you can choose a whole different set of controls aftermarket, and you can also add little things like this GPS mount here, and there's a GoPro mount that you can get for the bike as well, which also works for lights. Moving back, another classic XC feature, rather than a full-length dropper, you've got this little Fox Transfer SL post in there, so 100mm, and it's either up or it's down. Hasn't got the usual infinite kind of travel on it, but again, just saves weight, and the whole bike in this spec comes in at 11.2 kilos for the large, and that's with Syncross Silverton 1 carbon wheels, front and rear, Recon Race 29 by 2.4 tyres. So again, you know, obviously fast rolling XC tread, but good girth to them, so that's adding protection there. These aren't the tyres I ran today, incidentally. I was actually on Schwalbe Wicked wheels on a set of DT Swiss wheels, but I was hoping they were going to survive and be a bit tougher, but as you can see from the rip in the sidewall there that I've had to plug with a gel wrapper, that didn't quite work out as planned. But yeah, I mean, it's got space for a 2.4 inch tyre in it, and that's the main thing. And also, if you watch the Brazilian round of the World Cup, you'll know it's also got space for a 38 tooth chainring as well. If you've got the Legzanino and can power it, you can put a properly large chainring on there to really mash the gears on that final descending finish, which is how we run that race against a Santa Cruz, which had a smaller chainring clearance on it. But, you know, having been lucky enough to go to the Scott HQ in Switzerland recently, the level of design and depth of testing and prototyping they go into on these bikes, and also testing other bikes as benchmarks, is, you know, both in the lab and obviously on trails and with data acquisition devices, is really, really impressive. And the tube walls on these, I mean, again, they've refined the construction process, so it's built in as few pieces as possible, and they go with this policy of having a really kind of stiff, oversized bottom line, and then a much thinner, slimmer top line to give a bit of comfort, a bit of compliance in there. That's built into the bike, so that's all part of the ride character. I mean, to be fair, it's pretty damn stiff. You know, you've got the suspension to take out the hits, and everything from the bar to that down tube to that super wide bottom bracket is seriously stiff. It's all about getting the horsepower down, which for a bike like this makes perfect sense. The only thing I would say is, as you can see, it's a press fit BB, and that has started creaking over time. If you watch the live ride video, it's quite apparent that that's got some creak in there, and I think there's a little bit of creak in the pivot bearings as well. But this bike, I've been hammering it for several months, and I think it's had a pretty hard life on the demo team before that. In terms of the rest of the spec, you've got Shimano XTR brakes. These ones have actually behaved okay. Bike point has been reasonably predictable on them, which isn't always the case. 180mm rotor front, and then 160mm rotor rear, and then you've got full set SRAM AXS X01, so wireless, powered by that battery there, and on the front you've got an X01 carbon crank. So, I mean, it does cost $8 grand. It is a lot of money, but you are getting a really top end spec on this bike. Is this the Scott Spark RC I'd buy? Probably not, to be honest. The one I tested previously, which is the base level GX axis, actually gets essentially the same fork. It gets the same shock, same bars, the same tyres. It gets an aluminium wheel set, so there's a bit of weight gain there. But in terms of functionality, you'd be very, very hard pressed to tell any difference in the ride. And that is an absolute bargain at under £5,000. The only thing it doesn't come with as standard is a dropper post, but if you're talking a £3,000 difference, you could fit any dropper post you want into the setup and just integrate it into the system here, because it does actually come with a blank ready for that dropper lever there. And this, it definitely looks congested. I know it's not to everyone's taste, but because you've got 3 adjusters there for the front and rear lockout, as you can see. Works on that RL3 charger damper there. But actually, it's remarkably intuitive to use. That's your dropper lever there, then that's your partial lockout, that's your traction mode, and that's full lockout there. And if you need to get out of it, boom, straight away that top trigger And I think I've got it wrong once when I've been riding the bike, but other times I've been surprised how easily it all falls to hand. And you can see now, I mean, the light's picking up beautifully, but even things like the paintwork, they've specifically gone for, you know, a little kind of light, they've gone for a lightweight paint job on it, so there's a little bit of colour at the front and then it blends through to this naked lacquered carbon at the back, and that's primarily to save weight. I mean, I think it looks awesome as well. And what's interesting, they use this paint job all the way down through the range, so you know, you get that shared family look. You know, nobody need know whether you've got the £8 bike or the sub £5 bike, which, you know, could work both ways. If you want to show off your £8 bike, then it's a bit of a downer, but if the £5 bike rides almost as well and looks as good, then again, it's probably the one I go for in this instance. But the main thing is it saves you probably a couple of 100 grams in terms of paint weight. You know, a big can of paint weighs a lot, and you'd be amazed how many lightweight frames then get laden down with a lot of paint weight on them. Definitely not the case here. But even just details like the way they've scooped it out here for the bottle, that adds a bit of stiffness as well. And you can see there's a spare bottle mount there, because if you're running a bottle mount there as well, you'll need to shift that up as well. So it's, again, you know, it's a double bottle bike, it's the shock's hidden away, so that stays protected, it stays clean. It's a little more awkward to get to than the standard one, but as you see, not really that much. And I think the dividends in terms of durability and the shock lasting is definitely worth that couple of seconds it takes to open the hatch. And then if you look on the offside here, you've got a sag meter there. That little pointer gives you 0 to 25% sag ratings. And then if you pull this little, well, let me get hold of it, rubber cover off, you can see just in there you've got the travel ring for the top of the shock, so that shows me whether I'm getting full travel on. And as well as the 3 carbon frame versions, they also do a range of alloy framed bikes, which I'm really keen to jump on, to be honest, because they look absolutely excellent. Again, exactly the same frame form, but with blended welds on them, and they just look absolutely belting, especially the raw aluminium one they do in silver. I'll be very, very tempted to get one of those in and build that up as kind of an affordable, super fast mid-travel sort of trail. That, I think, with an aluminium frame weight, I mean, again, it's only, you know, it's around 3 kilos, so it's actually lighter than a lot of carbon bikes. But that's going to make it into more of a short travel trail bike than a pure XC bike. But of course, there are also the Scott 900 bikes, which are essentially the same frame, but with 130mm fork on the front and a slightly beefier spec, slightly different cockpit spec, full length dropper posts on those, chunkier tyres with more grip on, etc, etc, etc. And hopefully I'll be swapping this bike, giving that back to the Scott demo guys here at the Hard Rock, and picking up a trail version, and picking up the Trail Spark to start testing that straight after this one. So I'm really, really intrigued to see how they go, and I'll probably do a head-to-head video about that as well. But for now, that's the quick spec check and tech talk round on this bike. Look out for a Scott headquarters tour coming up on the channel. They've got another bike coming out relatively soon, so I'll bring that out when that launches, just in case I've captured something in the background I shouldn't have done. And yeah, like I say, keep your eyes peeled for the Scott Trail bike test, the Scott Spark Trail test that I'll be kicking off very shortly on the channel. But for now, massive thanks to Scott for loaning me the bike, thanks to Giro, Peaties and Crud sponsoring the channel, thanks to my Patreon supporters who pledge a small amount every month, and that really helps with the upkeep and the growth of the channel, and they get exclusive, extended and early releases ad-free as a thank you. So if you really like what I'm doing with the channel, then please consider joining them on Patreon. Their names are rolling up now, and becoming a subscriber. But click for standard subscription, click for notifications, give us a thumbs up if you've liked it, and tell your mates about the channel as well. The Scott Spark videos tend to be really, really popular. So as it, you know, unsurprisingly, because I have to say this is probably my favourite current bike. It just does everything I need. As you'll see from the live ride video, that's what you really need to watch to get an idea of how this bike's, even on some of the most radical, rowdy trails, you're likely to ride a mountain bike around of any travel. let alone 120mm travel XC bike. So I'll link that at the end. Make sure you watch that. Keep your eyes peeled for another Scott launch later in the year with some headquarters footage as well. But for now, I've been Guy Kesteven on Guy Kest TV, talking about the Scott Spark RC World Cup AXS XC Ripper that'll still turn in seriously impressive performance on some of the toughest trails in the UK.